Welcome back, everyone. You might want to lean in close for this one, because today we're visiting a spot where the past absolutely refuses to stay buried. We're exploring what is arguably the Isle of Wight's most haunted and definitely most cursed location, Knighton Gorges. Through the history we're looking at today, we're going to piece together this wild, centuries-old puzzle of murder, madness, and some truly bizarre spectral parties. Let's just dive right into this explainer. So think about this for a second. How can a house that literally no longer exists be the most haunted place on an entire island? It's a genuine paradox, right? The Isle of Wight is notoriously jam-packed with ghost stories, but Knighton Gorges kind of stands in a league of its own. Here's the crazy part. If you visit the site today, you're not going to find some spooky, sprawling manor. Nope. You'll just find two crumbling stone gateposts standing guard over this empty, overgrown patch of dirt. So the big question we're tackling is how an empty void of space generates more terrifying eyewitness accounts than actual standing castles.
To really wrap our heads around the ghosts, we first need to picture the physical reality that actually birthed them. Take a look at this 1833 engraving by George Brannan. This is Knighton Gorges, before its tragic end. It was originally built way back in the 12th century, and then later expanded into this absolutely magnificent Tudor Elizabethan mansion. I mean, people considered it one of the finest, most beautiful ancient mansions on the whole island. Picture these large, dimly lit rooms, grand windows, and those long, low-roofed galleries. It was the epicenter of high society. Artists, writers, local administrators, they all hung out there. But, as you'll see, beneath all that architectural beauty lay a really, really dark foundation.
Part 1. The Origins of a Curse.
To understand why this piece of land is just so violently haunted, we've got to trace the bloodlines of tragedy that basically soaked right into the soil. The darkness kicks off all the way back in 1170. Sir Hugh de Morville, one of the original owners, actually fled to this exact spot after taking part in the infamous assassination of Archbishop Thomas Becket at Canterbury Cathedral. And legend has it he brought this profound guilt and a heavy curse right back to the property with him. Fast forward to 1721, and we get the dark, highly mysterious death of Member of Parliament Tristram Dillington. And then, exactly 100 years later, in 1821, the final resident, Maurice Basset, decides to have this magnificent, sprawling estate completely and deliberately demolished. Folks say he did it either in a fit of syphilis-induced madness or out of pure spite just to disinherit his daughter Jane.
Now, even before it was torn down, the house was essentially a monument to sorrow. During a renovation in 1565, they actually kept a room from the ancient medieval foundation and integrated it right into the new Tudor mansion. Above the door, they carved the words, "The Room of Tears." Why call it that? Well, because it was in that very room that a former lord of the manor, Sir Theobald Russell, slowly died from brutal battle wounds. And as if that wasn't sad enough, shortly after he took his last breath, his wife, Lady Gorges, passed away in that exact same room, reportedly from a broken heart. In fact, before the whole house was destroyed, guests would often claim they heard this unexplained, sweet, sorrowful music, just drifting out of the empty room of tears.
Part 2. The Tragic Phantom Coach.
So our first major paranormal legend here centers on a really chilling blend of historical fact and a desperate cover-up. This is all about the death of Tristram Dillington in 1721. The grim historical rumor floating around is that Dillington, who was only 41, lost his wife and almost all his children to smallpox. Driven totally mad by grief and supposedly buried under crippling gambling debts, rumor says he took his own life. But here's the catch. Back in 1721, suicide was a crime that meant the crown could literally seize your entire estate. So, to save Knighton Gorges for Dillington's sisters, his loyal steward supposedly pulled off this macabre cover-up. The story goes that he took Dillington's corpse, strapped it tightly to the dead man's favorite horse, a beast fittingly named Thunderbolt, and just drove the horse right into the deep pond below the manor. The steward then played it off like Dillington simply got lost in the dark and drowned. And because he was a suspected suicide, he allegedly wasn't allowed a Christian burial. Instead, he was buried secretly in the estate's walled garden, where, by the way, a massive human skeleton was actually discovered years later.
And honestly, it seems like Tristram Dillington's restless spirit is still paying the toll for that tragic night. Every single year, right on the exact anniversary of his death, July 7th, eyewitnesses report this absolutely terrifying sight on the grounds. A dark phantom coach just manifests out of nowhere, and it's driven by the ghost of Tristram Dillington himself. It's pulled by 4 spectral horses, flanked by a ghostly hound, and they just tear through the property where his beloved manor used to stand. This isn't just 1 or 2 tall tales either. There were actually half a dozen officially recorded sightings of this spectral coach between 1927 and 1977 alone.
Part 3.
a ghostly New Year's gala.
Now, as crazy as Dillington's coach is, it's actually not the most famous anomaly at night in Gorges. That title belongs to what might be one of the most spectacular paranormal events in the world. Just picture this sequence of events from local folklore. First, a traveler walking near Newchurch on New Year's Eve is nearly run down by a speeding, reckless horse and carriage. Furious, he chases the carriage up a long driveway until he arrives at this massive, brilliantly lit mansion that is literally shaking with the sounds of a huge party. He pounds on the door to complain, but nobody answers, so he peers through the glass, right? And inside, he sees guests decked out in elaborate Georgian clothing. We're talking frilled shirts, silk stockings, hair tied with ribbons, and they're all just dancing and laughing. He figures it's just some elaborate fancy dress party and leaves in a huff. But then, the next morning, he tells his landlord about the rude coachman in the loud party, pointing out the exact spot on a map, and the landlord just goes ghost pale and has to tell the traveler that the house he just visited, Night in Gorges, was actually burned to the ground over a century ago.
And the wild part is, this isn't just some old wives' tale that got out of hand. It's been reported time and time again. Take the eyewitness account of Ethel Hargrove, an Isle of Wight writer. She actually ventured out to those empty gateposts on New Year's Eve back in 1915. She wrote about her experience saying, "A flood of melody arose. Dance music played on a harpsichord. Georgian minuet airs, slow and stately." And she didn't just hear it, folks. She claimed she saw the entire vanished manor resurrected right there in the dark, glowing with light. She described phantom party guests arriving, dogs baying, and then, at exactly midnight, the sharp crack of a pistol, right before the entire vision just vanished into thin air.
Part 4. Modern Echoes at the Gates. Now, those Georgian revelers might belong to the 18th century, but the paranormal activity here is far from stuck in the past. If you visit today, you're only going to find the dark, vaulted interior of a surviving arched brick building. Some folks call it Orchard Cottage or a forcing house, and it's somehow managed to survive that 1821 demolition. And nearby, you'll see the wild, overgrown remnants of the walled upper gardens, which, remember, are the exact same gardens where that mysterious giant skeleton was unearthed. So this is what ghost hunters are staring at in the pitch black today. It's desolate, it's rotting, and yet the energy here is reportedly just completely off the charts.
So what exactly are people experiencing out there right now? Well, even though those gateposts have been totally bare for over a century, visitors frequently report seeing phantom stone lions or gargoyles perched right on top of them, just staring down. And if you decide to park your car outside those gates, beware. There are countless reports of engines inexplicably dying, radios suddenly blasting at full volume completely on their own, and severe, instant battery drains on cameras and mobile phones. Plus, if you're standing out on the road, you might just catch a glimpse of a woman dressed in blue and purple. She's often seen desperately running from the empty void where the house used to be, heading straight toward the gates. Many locals firmly believe this is the ghost of Jane Bissett, the daughter whose father spitefully tore down her inheritance.
So what do you think actually happens at those crumbling gates when the clock strikes midnight on New Year's Eve? Is it just a trick of the wind howling through the trees? Maybe a collective hallucination born from a century of folklore? Or does the veil actually thin just enough for an 18th century harpsichord to play one last minuet? If you ever find yourself on the Isle of Wight on December 31st, perhaps you should visit the gates and find out for yourself. Just do me a favor and be sure to listen closely for the sound of an approaching phantom coach.